Ken's intro music. Selected intro music. Yeah, welcome to the TRANSCOM show. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here. You know, the whole purpose of the TRANSCOM show, and I remind you each month, is really to have that dialogue with the TRANSCOM teammates to ensure that we kind of level the bubbles, give you an opportunity to talk to leadership, get to know the leadership, get to know the subject matter of what we may be talking about. You know, we've talked in the past about the mobility requirement study that Mr. Bussler and his team were heavily involved in. We've talked about the Big Five before. We've talked about the new priorities. We've introduced you last month to Miss Dilly, you know, in the J8. And so, so it's just that opportunity. So I hope that we'll get a lot of great questions, really tough questions for Mr. Brennan, easy questions for me, please. I hope that happens today. But that is the opportunity for you, really, to ask those questions of leadership. And then if we don't know them, it's our opportunity to go back and get you the answer, because we owe you the answer. So it is really an honor and a pleasure to welcome our new Director of Acquisitions, and that is Mr. Ken Brennan. So Ken, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, as we always start off, you know, we've got a lot of new faces in the crowd. Generally, we do, and we've got a smattering of folks from the both here on the staff that are able to be in person, but we also have folks out on DCS, so I want to welcome those folks as well. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of say, who are you, and how'd you get here? So what was your path to TRANSCOM?
It was a long and varied path, and a path that I had actually not mapped out early on. I was born and raised and educated in Indiana, local boy. Took an engineering job at a warfare center in Crane, Indiana, and not terribly different than USTRANSCOM. It was a very rooted workforce. And I felt that I was doing good things there, but was looking for some broadening opportunities, and went to DC on a mid-career development. My first day was the 10th of September of 2001. Monday was good, Tuesday was a little odd, but we got into the warfighting stead. I was at the Navy Yard, I was not at the Pentagon. And what I thought was going to be 3 or 4 years actually turned into 18. So I moved around within the Department of Navy and then to OSD, and then the opportunity to come to TRANSCOM presented itself. And one of the questions that's a little bit later kind of there is that I came to TRANSCOM certainly for the opportunity, but also because of the work that we do here. I had done policy for a dozen years, and it has its own rewards, but it's not operations. So I really wanted to get back into ops. The second thing was that the workforce is different than the Pentagon. It's rooted, it's folks from the Midwest and outside, but it's not all outsiders like it was in DC. And then last thing was that being born and raised in Indiana, most of my family is still in Indiana and Illinois. So over the last 3 months, I have spent pretty much every weekend reconnecting with sisters, brothers, nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles, and that'll probably continue on for the foreseeable future.
That's a pretty awesome opportunity to be close to family. So now that you've told us a little bit about yourself, how does that influence your leadership style and your expectations of the acquisitions directorate?
Yeah, the main thing from my history is the diversification of skill sets. I started out as an engineer. I got into supervision, project and program management, big A acquisition on shipbuilding, and coupled with the fact that I moved around a lot. So I've got a diversity of experience, certified in program management and business cost estimating and financial management. Have held about 5 or 6 different series across my career. But it's not that I expect that from everyone, but that really informs my expectations for the workforce, in that I look for folks to broaden themselves consistently and constantly. And it doesn't necessarily mean moving to DC. But I think that a rotational assignment assignment or looking for another opportunity is to learn something on the job is a good expectation to have. And I also don't want to minimize the learning that happens outside of the job. I think that it's a great and wonderful thing to read about what's happening in foreign policy and in politics, but also just generally in continuing to develop your own mind, be it with a hobby or outside interest. All of these things make better rounded people, and better rounded people make better, more effective government employees. And I think that that empathy, that knowledge, that understanding is really what sets my expectations for the workforce.
Well, and certainly here at Scott Air Force Base, we have a little bit of a more unique opportunity for our employees than they would, say, at Grissom Air Reserve Base, right, where it's one small wing. Here, folks have that opportunity to work at another 4-star MAGCOM, come over to the Transportation Command, as well as other opportunities in the St. Louis area. So even if you're not going to move out to DC and expand your horizons, certainly there's some great opportunities here. And also the talent management group,
right.
You know, the working within TRANSCOM, working talent management, hopefully people take advantage of that. I have been on the receiving end for some phenomenal talent up on the third deck, and so I hope people will take advantage of that as well. So after you got here, I know you immediately sat down with General Lyons, who is, of course, was the former deputy and came back as the commander, so he has a pretty good idea of where he wants to go with the organization. What kind of guidance did he give you once you sat down with him that first time?
Yeah, the very first guidance was written and waiting on my desk when I walked in on my very first day. He composed a very nice letter that detailed the expectations, and while I've not shared the letter widely, the expectations that are in there I have, and they are directly related to his missions and priorities. He tasked me to ensure that TCAQ was capable of contributing to warfighting readiness and ensuring that our strategic transportation capabilities were not only maintained but further developed with the right incentives to the fourth component to make sure that our industry partners were capable of providing the needs of the military and our warfighters, not only during steady state, but during the actual execution of a high-end conflict with peer and near-peer competitors. A lot of this was reflected in Turbo Challenge 19. So there was a very quick engagement from the fire hose as it related to Turbo Challenge. But those guidance and the missions and priorities that he's posted publicly have influenced what I've been doing over the last 90 days and what we'll continue to do over the next couple of years.
So now that you've been here for more than 90 days, and I know you've reported out to him kind of what your thoughts are. So can you give us an idea of what you have been doing to follow that guidance over the last 90 days? Yeah,
the first 90 days were a lot of listening. So I looked at the organizational structure, both AQ and USTRANSCOM. Even though I'd worked a little bit with USTC before, I didn't have the depth of understanding needed to be the director. And I appreciate everyone that helped me out on that. In listening to the folks, developed 5 specific priorities that are going to be worked in order. We're looking at the organizational structure and the workload. So those two, while they're 1 and 2, are kind of interrelated. Are we doing the right things for the warfighter at the right resource allocation? The beauty part about this, but also the challenging part, is the first thing I found is this deeply rooted workforce is expert at what they do. There's nothing broken about AQ. There's always room for improvement, but I've actually literally come into jobs where things have been on fire, and it's not a pleasant experience. So here, things are actually in pretty good shape, but there are opportunities for us to create better alignments, create better prioritization amongst our workload so that we can better position ourselves for that high-end fight and the transportation requirements. The other 3 things, the third one is a little bit larger. AQ is the business advisor as it relates to industry capabilities for the commander. I think that there are some opportunities to expand that into perhaps a Wall Street-like investment grade recommendations about requirements definition, contract type, incentivization, and a lot of these things we've already taken into account in some of our vehicles like CRAF and VISA, but I think there's a broader opportunity across the entire transportation area. The last two initiatives based on that 90-day assessment are, coincidentally, I got the climate survey. And while we're actually in pretty good stead, there's a few areas for improvement, and a lot of those areas actually are consistent across TRANSCOM. Leadership transparency, EEO and SAPR processes, and then organizational processes. So we're going to work on fixing all of those three major areas. And again, it's not that they're broken. We're just going to try and move them up out of the yellow and improve their scores.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is obvious. Being new, not only a new director, but new to TRANSCOM, I have to build relationships that my predecessor, Gail Jorgensen, enjoyed in my own mold. Gail and I are not the same people, obviously. We have different experiences. So getting to know all of our mission partners is one of the things that I've really been concentrating on as well.
Yeah, so for the audience that aren't particularly, maybe not assigned to AQ, can you, and this wasn't one of our questions, but I'm curious as to the uniqueness that the AQ brings to this command that other combatant commands don't necessarily have.
Yeah, TRANSCOM is one of two, soon to be three, COCOMs that has acquisition authority. The rest of the COCOMs, the geographical COCOMs, do not have acquisition authority. So us, SOCOM, and CyberCom, and actually CyberCom may be done, I don't know yet, or I'm just not tracking. But that acquisition authority puts us in interesting stead that we are our own acquisition capability. So we are our own buyers. We are embedded with the requirements owners and are the mission partners, whereas the geographic COCOMs have an executive agent to actually do that for them. So building that relationship and being able to hold it internally is actually one of our strengths, so that we don't have to go across the street to one of the MILDEPs and exercise their authority.
Right. And what a unique opportunity. It's kind of like the JD PAC in our analysis center, you know, very unique to a combatant command to have that kind of responsibility and authority. So I think that helps the commander tremendously, and that just shows just how important this team is and how it's just how critical the team is to enabling the boss to meet his requirements. So we talked a little bit about your leaving the Pentagon. Any things you've observed now here at TRANSCOM that are so different from what's going on in DC and the Pentagon?
There is. The main thing is that the people. This is a very well connected to the warfighter organization. And the Pentagon is as well, but it's at a different level. It's not actually solving the day-to-day problems of an individual warfighter like it is here. It's about solving the larger problems of the entire military, the individual departments or COCOMs, and that has a different feel because you're pulling the levers of policy to solve longer-term problems that then have to translate down. We here are receiving that guidance and actually implementing it with acquisition solutions, analysis capabilities, planning, program management through the PEO to actually implement those policies that benefit the directly either a single warfighter or more regularly a unit or that type level. So the ability to see our problems solved with our actions is a whole lot easier than it is at the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you look to the future, what do you see in a successful workforce? We talked a little bit about the uniqueness of this particular workforce, but as we look for a successful workforce, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've actually got two answers on that. One is organizational. The organizational workforce needs to be a mission partner that is solving not only today's problems in execution, so for AQ that's awarding contracts and managing IT programs out of the PEO and doing all of the things necessary under that acquisition authority, but also leaning forward into what is next. We have an opportunity with a lot of the new programs, Global Household Goods, TMS, and a few others, EDE, the Data Environment, to really make a difference in what TRANSCOM is and what its capacity and capability is in the near and midterm future for a long-term capability. And as we shift from a more localized violent extremist organization to a near-peer competition, the preparations for that are different with contested environments and the capability and capacities of our adversaries. We've got an opportunity to build towards that future, to bring new capabilities, new tools, new processes to bear that'll make us even stronger. On an individual workforce, I talked a little bit about it earlier, continue to grow, diversify. If you have the opportunity to move around and that's something that your family position will allow, I certainly encourage it. If we can't take advantage of that opportunity, then we need to figure out how to create some other opportunities, either locally or even internally, to say an AQ for my folks. But I think that diversification, that empathy, that learning the language of our mission partners is important. And one point I wanted to stress, you've not heard me use the term customer today until just now. That's because the relationship that I want with AQ and the mission partners, the people that are actually defining the requirements and will use the capabilities that we bring to bear, it's not a retail type relationship. We're partners in this, and the AQ part is incredibly complicated and has some legal implications that the requirements owners, with their complications and their legal implications, have to marry up on. So as you begin to work more with AQ, as the folks in the audience who are AQ work with the folks that we support and support us, look to build that mission partner relationship as equals and not with a retail type mindset. Because that's really where I think we will all get stronger as we move forward.
Right. Yeah, fantastic. Relationships matter, right? So, and understanding, certainly as an aviator, Air Force aviator coming into this world and trying to understand what you and your team do, and then realizing at my level just how critically important it is that we do understand it and that we're thinking way out in advance so that it puts your team at an advantage that they can plan ahead and not be reactive, but proactive in their acquisition strategies. So, exactly. Further advice. So for these folks, somebody sitting in the audience that goes, you know, I want to be a Ken Brennan. I want to be a Miss Dilly. I want to be a Miss Jorgensen. What kind of advice do you have for somebody that's out here that's contemplating the SES world?
First and foremost, you've got to be good at your job. You need to be successful. Concentrate on doing a good job with what you've got to do today. Because if you don't have that in your hip pocket, you can't actually get to the next step. The next step in preparation is, it varies by person to person, but in general, build a network, reach out, help people solve problems. That will become its own calling card, and folks will reach back to you when opportunities present itself. I've already talked a little bit about the employee development, etc. I do have some postgraduate and some credentials and those type things, but they were not necessarily developed for the next step. They were things I needed to do the current step that then put me on the stead to move forward. So don't get too enamored with the credentials and those things in and of their own sake that would qualify you to become a J director or a deputy undersecretary or something like that. Get those if they help you with your current job. Do that current job well, and then the network will help through. In particular, the way I found out about this job was not because it was advertised, which it was, but before it even hit, two people that had awareness that this job was going to open said, keep your eyes peeled, we think you might be a good candidate for this. And I had competition, good competition, and as it turns out, I wasn't maybe necessarily the best person at the time, but I was the best positioned at the time, which I guess then made me the best person for me. So hopefully I'll earn that trust, continue to earn that trust, because General Lyons and I talked even before the interview. So that network, my performance in the current job, very, very important.
Absolutely. Being the best at your job and everything will work out, right? So I always try to tell people, be a really good follower so you can learn to be a really great leader, right? So, well, hey, listen, I want to leave a little bit of time for questions that folks in the audience might have, whether it's here in the audience or out in DTS land. So I want to give folks an opportunity to ask Ken some questions. They can be about anything, his love of the Cardinals or whatever whatever we want to talk about. So. His music that he just had out there. Who was that again?
That was Talking Heads.
Talking Heads, okay.
Making sense.
Okay, all right. So questions from the audience for Ken. I know somebody's got something.
So as we wait for a hand, there's one. One of the things also, luck favorites are prepared. Don't wait to write on your dream job until it pops, because you're going to need some iterations to hone your package, your ECQs, your interview style. So practice does make perfect on
Absolutely.
that. So.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Brennan. Peg Nigler from the History Office. You mentioned talent management. Acquisition people have to have all sorts of certifications. Does that mean they're limited to other acquisition organizations? Can someone come in from the outside, so to speak, and switch jobs? Is that something?
Yeah. It is a little harder to move between acquisition and non-acquisition, but it is not impossible. For those that are in the acquisition workforce, the ease of moving within and the diversification of all of the different types of jobs that are in there make that a little easier. For the non-acquisition coming in or vice versa, a little more challenging, but it can be done. So what we would do is we would maintain, say, a DCPDS, the HR system certification, but maybe on a rotational term.
What about to the components? DLA, who's not a component, but to say AMC or SDDC or some other COCOM?
Yeah, I think that those are great opportunities, and if we don't have relationships built to where we're talking about something yet, and I hadn't thought about all of those by name, but a number of those I had thought about by name, that we can actually do swaps and trade people in and out for a period of time so that they've got experience, and that is the management reassignment or a lateral type thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that we've got some directors that have actually gone out and done that between whether it's DLA or offices in the Pentagon to broaden those resumes. You know, whether it's forever or just on a temporary basis, and encouraging people to take advantage of that talent management when the opportunity comes, because it has certainly helped to broaden that horizon. Right, really enable. I've had two people, now three, but two specifically from the J8 that have now been put back down in the J8, either as a promotion in another division, or back to their job where they really bring a little bit of a broadened perspective. So take advantage of those opportunities. So other questions?
And there are actually, while we're waiting for the next question, we actually have rotational assignments where people are supporting the Reform Office in DC from here. So with a mix of some travel, not very much, but mostly remote connectivity, we've actually got folks that have been supporting Reform from here, and DLA have done it successfully remotely.
Yeah. So, great. Other questions? Anything? Yes, sir.
Well, please wait for the mic.
Hi, Jason Morgan, I'm the DHS advisor here. I'd like to hear your thoughts on alternatives to lowest cost technically acceptable. And you had mentioned somewhat in your comments earlier the idea of what is the best value to the government, and how would you measure that, and what are your thoughts or plans to change that business model here? Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Jason. That's a great question. There is an entire spectrum of strategies by which to evaluate the value of a contract and make a source selection decision. The lowest price technically acceptable is actually not a bad idea in certain cases, but you have to have the right case and do it for the right reasons. If you are on a generic drug for blood pressure like I am, okay, and I think that a lot of us probably have some exposure to the generic drug capacity, you're actually exercising an LPTA execution as deemed by your insurance company. They said technically acceptable is an FDA-approved pill that lowers your blood pressure or your cholesterol or whatever it is, and it's genericized so that you don't pay the premium price. So LPTA isn't necessarily a bad thing. Where it gets a bad rap is when it's misapplied. So what I want to make sure is that when a strategy is developed for LPTA, you can define the requirements and you won't pay one thin dime for any additional capability, no matter how great. If you meet those 2 points, and there's some other nuances as well, but those are the 2 big ones, LPTA is probably a good thing. But if someone came in and said, hey, I got this pill for blood pressure and it will make you stronger or taller or thinner, whatever your second desirable characteristic is, LPTA is not a good thing because then there's a best value. How much are you willing to pay for that? So in determining the strategy that best fits, we need to be able to look at the entire spectrum, and then when we evaluate best value at the end, it doesn't start with what do you want to pay for this, or what is the entire capability. You start with stratifying what are the individual capabilities that are most important to you. And then you have a discussion about what is it worth to you. In services, it's a little, it's complex on both services and products, but it's a little easier to explain on products. If the requirement is for a jet to go Mach 8, and someone comes in and says, hey, I can give you Mach 12, that's a good thing, but if it's going to cost you $28 trillion, you can't afford that. So you got to balance that out. How much is it worth to you and how much money do you have, and against the requirement that you're trying to fight. Jet planes' speeds are set against the threats that are trying to chase them down and how quickly they can get to target, and amongst other things, and the physics, of course. So you've got to balance all of those things as an entire package. So back to the mission partner lash-up, the AQ side understands how to define these things. The requirements owner actually knows what are the things that are important and how important they are to them so that you can make that best value strategy. And everyone's going to be a little bit different, so you got to work them individually. So hope that answers your question.
You know, Ken, this 30 minutes has gone by pretty quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. And I once again want to thank everybody for being here and getting an opportunity to get to know you, and really glad to have you on the team. I thought what you were going to tell me on why you left the Pentagon to come here was because of the commute, your new commute, right?
My new commute is something.
He lives right here on base, one of the few civilian directors that actually lives on base. And so, and that's to our advantage to have you so close by and really getting to know one another. And I can tell you that in my 2.5 years here, your acquisition team has taught me some incredible things and really allowed me to help with the top 3 to get after what we have to get after with some sort of education on the process. So can't thank you enough. You know, this is my last TRANSCOM show, and I can't thank everybody enough for your participation. But what I like to do is recognize superstars as the director has let me know. And so I want to do my last one to recognize Miss Lissel Holland. And so, Miss Holland, can you come up here, please? Yeah, come on up. How you doing? So I'm just going to embarrass you just for a minute. Yeah, but it's deserved. It's well deserved. So I'm going to read this. It's She's TCAQ's ACT demo expert, and if you're a DP map employee, like I am on the outside, totally different system, very complicated. So she is the expert. In addition to maintaining all of the records, she supports 3 pay panels and ensures overall pay pool compensation and submission. Her work ensured we had correct alignment in the payout, all assessments were complete, and that we had 100% data integrity for all salary and award calculations. Not a small task, I can tell you. Lissel devised a method to calculate and transform the earned monetary award time off to allow time off awards in active, which was huge morale booster in the directorate, and I would agree. Her skills were a big factor in AQ, being one of the first directorates to successfully test the DLA HR pilot program, which we're all experiencing, and that's great stuff right now, with 26 personnel actions completed to date in approximately 3 weeks versus the previous system's completion time of 4 to 6 months, which is helping get after the boss's warfighting mission readiness. And that our fill rates have a direct impact on that ability to go to war. So thank you for that. And you're our go-to person for the Everything Act demo. In recognition of your support for all these processes and employee recognition, we want to recognize you as the superstar for AQ. So please accept this very small token of my appreciation on behalf of the commander and the 122,000 men and women of USTRANSCOM. So congratulations. Absolutely my pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. Congratulations.
All right, well, thank you. So that's the show. Thanks again, Ken. I want to thank you for coming out here. Absolutely, our pleasure. And remember, nobody reads my email but me. Nobody. And so if you've got an issue that you just didn't want to ask, or a question you didn't want to ask, you need guidance on something, clarification, rumor control, whatever it is, please don't hesitate to email me, and I'll get after it for you, because we owe you that. So, hey, new chief of staff is going to be coming in. Her name is Brigadier General Deb Katulich. She's Army. She is an IBM executive. Who's coming here on a 2-year tour, because as you know, this is one of the chairman's 10 positions where we bring reserve component folks like myself in for an active duty tour. So she is excited to get here. She'll be here on June 7th. So we're not sure what the next TRANSCOM show's subject's going to be. I have a feeling in the future it might be introducing her. She may be interviewing herself, swapping seats, back and forth, but who knows. But I encourage you to continue to participate in the TRANSCOM show. Really do. In person or on DCS, we really appreciate it, because this is our chance to help with those climate surveys, for example. We've had 3 since I've been here. I've read all 3, and we've done really tried to work hard at getting after those things that you bring up. But if we, the senior leaders, do not know what those issues are, it's very, very hard for us to work on them. So continue to voice your concerns, ask those questions, be the squeaky wheel, right? Let us know what your concerns are. So until we meet again, thanks a lot. I appreciate all your support. Have a great day. Carry on. Thanks.
Thanks for doing it.
Yeah.